Hello, welcome to the session on Big Band Basics for Jazz Guitar. I'm glad you joined us. My name is Sam Bergstrom. I teach at Anoka Ramsey Community College. Pretty much everything I'm going to be talking about today will apply to playing in the swing style. So whether that be comping style and rhythm or chord voicings and even tone, all those types of things will mainly be focused for swing style playing. Now if you have other tunes, maybe rock or funk style or straight eighth, more contemporary styles, things like that, you may want to adjust a lot of the things I'm talking about today. But I figured I'd focus on this as it kind of makes up so much of the history of jazz and big band music, and oftentimes is the majority of what a lot of directors program. So maybe in a future video we'll talk about some of those other things. But today I'd like to talk about the role of the guitar in the big band and what you can maybe expect from a lot of guitar players coming into your program wanting to play. We'll also talk about some tone things and some gear issues, as well as some right and left hand technique considerations, and we'll also get into obviously the comping style and chord voicings as well. I think a lot of directors face some, and guitarists face some challenges with their background coming into the program, whereas they may not be playing in an ensemble like all your wind players, so they may not have that practice of balancing and blending with others and reading and things like that. But they come with other strengths, whether that be improvisation or just able to kind of jam and fit into that groove and that pocket and really use their ears. So with a little bit of guidance and help from you as the director, you can really help your guitarist fit into the ensemble, and they can really add a lot to your jazz ensemble. So there's a few different roles that guitarists play. First of all, just like anyone else in the band, they may be asked to improvise, and you might find that a lot of your guitar players might be some of your best improvisers in your band for reasons I just mentioned. So that's something to keep in mind. Another role is sometimes guitarists are asked to play melodic lines, whether that might be doubled or playing along with the sax section or the trumpet section, things like that. That might be an issue for some guitarists. We're notoriously bad sight readers for a couple different reasons we won't go into now. But when you're auditioning and getting to know a guitarist's abilities, I urge you to think about giving them some music to take home for a few days so that they can really work on it rather than focus too much on the sight reading, and put more focus on their ability to kind of really groove and fit into that pocket, and how good their sense of time and rhythm is. And then the kind of the third big role of the guitarist is to comp chords. So that's what we're going to be talking a lot about today. I think a lot of good guitarists will think of the guitar as more of a rhythmic instrument rather than a harmonic or even melodic instrument. It's really important that the guitarist locks in with the drummer. You're going to hear, I've heard it, I just read an article that said the author mentioned that the guitar can be thought of as pitched percussion, even though we already have pitched percussion. But I've also heard the term harmonic hi-hat. So it's really kind of goes to show that it's really important that they fit in rhythmically, and they're locking in on 2 and 4 with the hi-hat, and then 1 and 3 more with the ride cymbal. So that so think about the guitarist and the drummer really locking in to that sense. I'd like to talk a little bit about tone first. So first of all, pretty much any electric guitar your guitarist brings in, you can work with. They don't necessarily need to have a hollow body or semi-hollow body like this. But there are some tricks you can use to make it to fix the tone to make it fit in to a little more dark, warm, jazzy sound. And again, if you're playing something like funk or rock or something like that, you might want to change some of these settings and some of the things I'm going to talk about right now. But guitars usually, most of the time, come with either 2 or 3 pickups. The pickup that you typically want to use is the neck pickup, which is closest to the neck. You're going to get a darker sound that way. And you can adjust which pickups are being used by a toggle switch. Sometimes it's here, sometimes it's here. But typically, if you flip that switch so it's closest, pointed closer to your head, that's going to utilize the neck pickup. So if I have it all the way down, I'm going to mainly get this pickup. And you can tell it's a little bit brighter, a little bit darker now that I put it in the middle, so both pickups are being used. Now that's even darker and warmer, and that's just with this pickup. So that's the first thing you want to do on your guitar is to utilize that neck pickup. Now when the guitarist solos, they might want to flip that back so they're using both pickups or all 3 or things like that. But for the majority of comping, I would recommend that setting, so you're just using that pickup. The other thing you want to do is, set your EQ on your amp so that the mid is down quite a bit, and maybe your treble is kind of right in the middle, but really kind of move up the bass a little bit. So instead of getting, this kind of sound, you can get a darker, bit darker sound. So there's a couple ways you can mess with the EQ on the amp and on the guitar as well. Another thing that I'd like to mention quickly is about the amp placement. I like to have the amp, I have it up here right now, but typically I like to have it on the ground, usually to the left of me, just kind of right behind me. That way I can hear it a little bit better. If it's in front of the guitarist, they're going to have a really hard time hearing themselves. So have it a little bit behind them, and you can experiment if you want it up on a chair or an amp stand, or if you want to just have it on the floor. I usually just have it on the floor. So that's another thing to think about. And as far as the volume goes, this is something you as the director really need to kind of help the guitarist with, because the volume that they're going to hear sitting right next to the amp may not be reflective of what they need, or what you're going to hear standing in front of the band, or what the audience will hear even further in front of the band. So you might need to help them set the volume. Now, when the guitarist comps chords, that's going to probably be the loudest. That's going to be louder than just playing a melodic line or solo. So what I always recommend is setting your volume so that if you have a melodic line, or maybe how you solo, how loud you want it when you solo, have that cranked up to, pretty much as far as you can go on the volume of the guitar, and then try to set another volume for comp and chords. And then, like, if I have my volume set at 10, there's a 10 marking on my volume knob. If I move it down to, let's say, 6, and I kind of line up that 6 with the bridge, that's kind of the difference I have of volume when I'm playing a solo or melodic line versus comp and chords. So, and that's something you're going to have to help the guitarist kind of mess with. The other thing that can help is the volume pedal. If the guitarist has one of those, or if he has a wah, or she has a wah pedal, you can also use that. If you set it off of the wah setting, it can sometimes function as a volume pedal as well. So something to think about with the volume. And the last thing I'd like to say, just with kind of a gear, as long as we're on the gear, is one of these clip-on tuners. If your guitarist has one, awesome. If they don't, make sure they get one. I mean, you can find good ones for $15 or less, and you can have your volume all the way down because it senses through the vibrations. So so they can completely be inaudible but yet tune their guitar. So that's pretty handy as well. So as far as the right hand goes, I'll get a little ahead of myself, and all the voicings I'm going to talk about today have to deal with using three notes on 3 different strings: the 6th string, the 4th string, and the 3rd string. So obviously I'll get into that more later, but as far as the right hand, there's a couple different things you can do. First of all, I think a lot of guitarists will be used to using a pick, and I recommend a heavier pick. In the handout that hopefully everyone got, there's some information about Freddie Green and how his guitar was set up, and how he used he'd use heavy gauge strings and things like that with a heavy pick. What I recommend for pick for strumming is all down strokes. And every beat. We're going to comp on every beat. The other thing you can do is if your guitarist is more used to playing with their fingers, maybe they have their finger style, or they're classically trained where they're using their fingers a lot, they can use the thumb on the 6th string and their first finger on the 4th string, and then their middle finger on the 3rd string. Just do this kind of motion where your thumb's going down and your fingers are going towards your palm. You're going to be a little bit more accurate, and you're not going to accidentally hit some open strings, which will be nice. But the pick, you're going to get a little bit more of that authentic chunk sound. So it's kind of up to you and your guitarist what you prefer regarding that. But as far as the comping pattern, again, we're going to play basically on every beat, just every downbeat. And the other thing to think about is you want to have 2 and 4 accented a little bit more, but you want separation in between them, between each beat. But especially 2 and 4 should not only be emphasized a little bit more, but it should be a little bit shorter. Some people think of this as chunk, but I was reading recently, someone referenced we should use choo, chit, CHOOCHIT. So, because chew was on 1 and 3, that would be more along with the ride cymbal, which would be a little bit longer, and then chit on 2 and 4 would be with the hi-hat, nice crisp. So that's kind of the comping style. And one of the other things, talking about guitar players, a lot of times they'll come in and they'll be used to playing in rock bands and things like that, and they'll be used to taking a lot of liberty with how they strum, and they may not be used to having to fit in with a rhythm section in a large band. So you might need to help them figure out their role, and how that they should not really take much liberty with the comping. They should just stick to quarter notes the whole time. And when you pull out that funk tune or whatever, then maybe they can take much more liberty with that. But for this, it's just all about fitting into that pocket, and it's just like a percussive instrument. Now with the left hand, again, we're going to be playing on the 6th string, which is the string, the lowest string, which is also closest to this guy, which is kind of counterintuitive. And then we're going to omit the 5th string, and we're going to play on the 4th string and then the 3rd string. And then we're omitting the first 2 strings. Okay? So this poses some issues, especially with the pick, because if you have your fingers placed in a certain way, and if they're really arched like that, you're going to get some of those open strings resonating, which you do not want. So the way to combat that, if you use your fingers, that's really not too big of an issue. But if you use a pick, you have to kind of angle your finger, whatever finger's playing on the sixth string, you have to kind of angle down so that it touches the fifth string but doesn't push the fifth string down. So it makes that kind of sound. And then you want to have the pick stop before you get to the first two strings, or have another finger or two kind of muting those strings. So that's kind of some ideas about the finger placement to avoid those open strings resonating. The other thing is you don't want to necessarily have this sound either. Just that sustained sound, you don't want to necessarily have that. So one way to combat that is to just push down the strings when you strike them, and then lift your fingers up, but keep them in contact. The fingers don't ever come off the strings. It's just the pressure loosens so that it's so that they're not being pressed down. So press down, and then they're not pressed down. So I don't know if you can really see it, but my hand presses down when I strike the strings with my picking hand, and then I immediately kind of let the energy out of them to kind of stop the strings from vibrating. So you're going to get, with that separation there, you'll get a much better sound and fit into the groove a lot better. So now I'd like to get into chord voicings. This is by far probably the biggest issue I see with guitarists. All the chords I'm going to be talking about today kind of derive from two different chords, two different open chords. So the first chord is this E chord. Okay, just a good old E chord. I'm going to switch my fingers around. I'm playing the same exact chord, but I'm going to switch my fingering around so that my first finger is free. Now all I'm going to do is I'm going to move that whole chord up one fret, or a half step, same thing. And then I'm going to put my first finger so that it's barring all six strings. So that's called the bar chord. So my first finger is acting like a capo or this nut, just like I moved the nut up one fret. Okay, so that's what I call an E-type bar chord, because it's derived from the open E chord. So if I take away that fourth string, pinky, then it turns into a seventh chord. Okay. So the reason why I'm talking about this is because most students will know this chord, the E chord, and this E-type bar chord. So if you can help your students relate the new chords that I'll be showing you in this video to this chord, it's going to be much easier for them. Just like in anything, if we're going to expose students to a new skill set, some new information, they're going to be much more successful if they can relate that information to something they already know. So if you can base all the chords that I'm going to talk about, or half the chords off of this chord and then the other half off another chord I'll show you in a moment, they're going to be much more successful. So we have this G chord, bar chord, we take off this pinky, and then we have a seventh chord. And then another chord that they might play, I'm not going to show you this one today, I'm just going to show you for example, is an A-type bar chord right there. So a lot of times what students will come in playing will be something like this. So, and that's fine, it doesn't sound too bad, but the main issue is that with that is the most prominent notes coming out are the bottom two strings, which is an open fifth, and it's going to sound like a power chord. So you want your students to sound like Freddie Green, not Green Day. So Green Day is great and all, but the power chord is not as jazzy as some of the other chords I want to show you. But essentially that's the chord they're going to play. We're just going to switch the fingering around. So we don't need the bar chord. We're going to talk about these, what we call 3-note fat chords, which Freddie Green used a lot. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this E-type bar chord. It's on 3rd fret, so it's G, and we're not going to play the 5th string. So we're just going to put our first finger on the root on the 3rd fret, 6th string. Now we're going to take our second finger and we're going to put it on the 4th string, same fret, and that's the 7th. Now we're going to take our 3rd finger, our ring finger, and we're going to put it on the 4th fret and on the 3rd string, and that's going to be the 3rd. Okay? So that is a G7 chord. So again, I talked about earlier, since that 5th string is omitted and we don't have any fingers on that, we need to have our first finger angled a little bit so it mutes it. So I'm just going to show you a few chords here, and then I'm going to play a few examples. In the handout, it goes through some of these blues progressions, and I'll go through some in a moment here. So that's a 7th chord, right? Now I'll show you the minor 7th chord. So since the 3rd is on the 3rd string, all we have to do is move that down a fret to make it a minor 3rd. So now I have all 3 fingers all on the 3rd fret. So that's the minor 7th. Okay? So I'm just going to start with the, let me show you one more chord first, and then I'll play this first example. So we talked about the E-type chord and how a lot of the chords I'm going to show you derive from that. The other chord that I want to show you today is the C chord. So the C chord is starts on the 5th string on the 3rd fret. So I have my my ring finger on the 3rd fret, 5th string. That's the root. My middle finger is on the 4th string in the 2nd fret, and that's a 3rd. And then the open 3rd string is the 5th, and then my first finger is on the root. Okay, so that's a C chord. Now if I take my pinky and I put it on the 3rd string, now it is a C7 chord. Now what I'm going to do is take my 3rd finger, I'm going to put it down a string on the 6th string. So now what I did is I removed the root on the 5th string and I put the 5th in the bass on the 6th string. Okay? So I might switch my fingers around now. There's the 5th, there's the 3rd, there's the 7th. Okay? So I'm playing on the 6th string, 3rd fret, and this is still a C7 by the way. And then my first finger's playing the 3rd on the 2nd fret, 4th string, and then my ring finger's playing the 7th, which is the 3rd fret, 3rd string. Okay? So the cool thing about all the voices I'm going to show you is they all utilize the 6th, 4th, and 3rd string. So the voice leading will be, so the idea is the voice leading will be nice and smooth too. And just like we learned in our theory class and part writing and stuff, we want to have smooth voice leading, and that's really what Freddie Green did. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the G7. And again, under blues progression example 1, these 2 chords are shown. I think they both show up as G7, but the C7 would obviously be in the second, third fret. So here's how this will sound. Go to the C7, back to the G7. I'm going to go up to the D7, 2 frets higher than the C. Yeah, so you just have to, the student just has, guitarists just have to get used to, if you're playing that E-type bar chord, the root will be on the 6th string. If you're playing the C-type bar chord, like we played the C7 and then the D7 in that blues progression, the 5th will be on the 6th string. So they just have to maybe visualize that the root would be 1 string up, same fret as what you're playing on the 6th string, but it will be on the 5th string. Even though they're not playing the 5th string, sometimes it's easier to visualize that that's the root. Okay? And then the next example of the blues progression, example 2, now we go to that minor 7. Oops. So all on the same fret. So again, this E-type bar chord, so the root is on the 6th string. So we'll see that A minor 7 come up, which will be in the 5th fret. So I'll play you this example now. Blues progression example 2 in your handout. Here we go. To E7. So that's an example with that minor chord in there. So far I've played the 2 examples where I started with an E-type bar chord. So the root has been in the bass on the 6th string. Now, the third blues progression example, I go up to it's an F. So I'm gonna move this up the neck a little bit, and I'm gonna play my F up here, starting with a C-type bar chord. So the 5th of the chord, or the C, will be in the bass. And then when I go to the 4 and the 5 chord, I'll be playing that E-type bar chord. So they're just flip-flopped as far as what type of chord is playing what. So here's the blues progression number 3 in F. So you can tell it kind of depends on maybe what key you're in, whether or not you want to start with an E-type bar chord or a C-type bar chord, where you're at it on the neck. I should also mention that utilizes a new chord. We learned that G minor 7, the E-type, where the root is in the bass. But now, if we want to play that same G minor 7 up here, so here's just a G dominant 7, right? We learned that one back here, the C chord. We're going to move it up here so that the 6th string is playing on the 10th fret. All right, so there's that chord, and what we're going to do is that's the 5th, that's the 3rd, and that's the 7th. So the 4th string is playing the 3rd, and we're doing that with our first finger. So I'm just going to move my first finger down a fret. So now, so instead of being on the 10th fret with our 2nd and with our middle and ring finger, and in the 9th fret with our first finger, we're going to be down to the 8th fret with our first finger, and then that's a minor 7. So that's another way to kind of play that. Okay, so a couple other things to think about that I want to make very clear. First of all, if you have a really fast moving tune, the guitarist doesn't necessarily have to play every chord. A lot of those, sometimes, I play charts where, the chords are shifting every 2 beats or even every beat. And that can be kind of intimidating and really tricky. So you can work with your guitarist to pick out what chords to play or simplify them. Maybe they can get by with just playing a 7th chord for the full measure rather than switching to all these extensions and things like that. Or just playing beats 2 and 4 if it's really fast. The other thing I would say is your guitarist doesn't have to play every single note in the chord or some of these extended harmonies. I think one thing I put in the handout is you don't have to play. I would start with playing up to the 6th and 7th of the chord, but just leaving off anything else. So if it's a 9th, 11th, 13th, just omit it and play a 7th chord instead. If it's a 6th chord, obviously play that. But if it's a 6-9, you can just play a 6th chord. As long as you have the triad is the same, and then so if it's a major 7, obviously you want to have them play a major 7 and not a dominant 7. But yeah, I would simplify things. And as soon as the guitarist is able to really master the chords that I mentioned in the handout to start with, once they really feel good about that and are able to simplify the chord progression to just using those, and they're really fitting into the pocket and locking in with the rhythm section, then I think then they can start looking at some of those other voicings and adding in ninths and flats and sharps and all that kind of stuff. So I want to mention that. But I just wanted to end by playing a couple examples of maybe how I would voice these chords, and you can hear it in context. So the first thing I want to do is just play a recording of Oliver Nelson's tune Emancipation Blues. It's just a G blues, and I think the last chord in there just says D7, but it's a D7 flat 9. But I'm just going to play D7 because that's what I'd probably recommend. Because you have to realize that, if it says D7 flat 9, that flat 9 is probably played by somebody in the band. So it's not crucial that the guitarist also plays that chord tone. It'll be picked up somewhere else. So yeah, if they can simplify things, they'll be able to add a lot more and not worry about all those extensions and alterations for a while. So I'll just play a little bit of this so you can kind of hear it in context. So that's just an example of how that might fit, how that sounds more in context. I wish I had a full band behind me so you could hear, but the next thing I want to play is, this is a high school recording of one of my favorite tunes, Groovin' Hard by Don Menza. This is the Bardoon arrangement that many of you maybe have done. So I'm going to play this one up here. So you can kind of hear how this will fit in now. just an example of that. And the last tune I'll just try real quick for you is a great Benny Carter tune called Easy Money. And again, just so you can kind of hear this in context of kind of how it sounds. So that's all I have for you today. Hopefully this will be helpful, and feel free to share this actual video with your students if that's helpful as well. As in the handout, don't be afraid to make copies for your guitarists. And if you ever have any questions or anything, don't hesitate to email me. My email is samuel.bergstrom@anokaramsey.edu. Should be on that handout as well. And don't hesitate to get a hold of me. And thanks again, everyone. Take care.